In the grim darkness of today's episode, I talk about Dawn of War 2 and its first expansion, Chaos Rising. But if this is your first time on my channel, good morning, afternoon, evening, I'm StefaNonsense and gaming and geek culture is what I do. If you're already a subscriber, welcome back. Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War 2 is a real-time tactical RPG in which you take over a squad of space marines with ancient Greek and Roman names and get to dip your toe into the molasses-thick lore of the Warhammer 40K universe, while blasting orcs, tyranids and demons into many gory pieces. Granted, if you've played the first Dawn of War, then your toe has been properly drenched in the blood of the Emperor's enemies already, but Dawn of War 2 is quite a different beast from its predecessor. While the first one was more of a traditional real-time strategy focused on base building and such, its sequel approaches things very differently. Here we get a 4-man squad based game with several RPG elements, great graphics, fluid animations and a pretty engrossing campaign, not to mention some solid sound design. The initial campaign is on a ticking clock, in the sense that you can only do a certain number of missions during the game, and as you advance through the story you'll have to make some choices depending on your needs for gear mostly. Each deployment basically takes one in-game day, and as time passes, events continue to unfold outside of your influence. There are 2 optional mission goals on every deployment on the planet, only one of which you can functionally accomplish, so you'll have to choose between different potential benefits while you're on the ground. You can also not go for any of them and try for a super quick completion time and get some extra XP at the end of the mission because of that. It depends on how you like to play the game. I personally prefer to kill everything on the map in order to maximize my loot potential and XP, but that's just me. Coincidentally, that will also get you extra XP at the end of the mission. Besides, the game's still looking pretty damn good, especially when you consider it's a 10-year-old game. Yep, Dawn of War 2 was released back in 2009. The combat is what makes or breaks it, and in this case, it definitely makes it. The combat is so good in fact that there are still people playing the online multiplayer version 10 years later. But that isn't something that really interested me, to be honest. Dawn of War 2 got its claws into me thanks to the single player experience exclusively. The game offers you a plethora of tactical options, ranging from things like stealth and positioning to making sure you make the most out of your Space Marines' abilities. In this game, real-time combat can actually be both dynamic and rather tactical. Thanks in part to the setting, which allows for the presence of superhuman walking tanks to exist, but also thanks to the sound effects and animations employed by the models, especially when firing guns. The thunderous sounds of heavy bolters are always a pleasure to listen to, once Avitus's squad sets up their firing positions of course. So combat feels very urgent and dynamic, but from the standpoint of hit points, your team can survive for a long time being shot at directly. Using the Marines' special abilities, which there are quite a few of, tends to be, if not exactly game changing, although they can be that, it tends to be a great way of shortening encounters. Otherwise, you can set up firing positions in buildings, you can stealth and bomb the buildings that your enemies are set up in, and in general, you should try to flank heavy weapon users as it takes time for them to reset. Or once you have jump packs, dive bomb groups of enemies and see them fly all over the place. It's quite glorious. And as for the boss fights, because these missions generally end in your squad having to take down a particularly nasty baddie, while arguably repetitive overall, do keep things varied, with the bosses having different types of abilities for you to deal with. One issue would be the fact that you'll be repeating a bunch of the maps because of how the story unfolds. It seems a bit of a cheap sort of ploy to increase playtime or to recycle already made assets, but it's not that big of a problem because you usually fight different types of enemies even if the map is the same. So now that I mentioned abilities, it seems like it's the right time to talk about the RPG elements that were thrown into the mix. Your Space Marines will level up as they go through more deployments. Their stat system is based around 4 general stats, but crucially, investing in these stats will result in different special abilities depending on the Marine's role in the party. This is a pretty cool addition to the real-time tactics aspect, but due to both in-game and most likely development reasons, you are somewhat partially railroaded when it comes to prioritizing which stat gets more points. What I mean by this is that each Space Marine will have one stat that can be developed considerably more than the others. In the case of the Force Commander, the character you are playing as, he is heavily focused on melee combat, which, mind you, isn't a bad thing because all of the others are mostly focused on ranged combat, and it's great to have a frontline tank capable of both taking damage and dishing it out while the enemies are sprayed with heavy bolter fire. You can obviously choose to ignore the primary stat and invest your points into the others, if you're looking for a bit of an extra challenge, but investing heavily in the primary stat will help to optimize each Space Marine for their particular role in the party. That being said, since it's unlikely that you'll get enough points to fill out all of the stats besides the priority stat, you'll have to choose another one to focus on from the other three, thus allowing you to create several other builds even while still having the Space Marine be good at their role. Successfully completing missions isn't the only way that you can get experience though. You can level up your Space Marines faster by transforming items into experience. This is a great way of unlocking beneficial character traits much faster. Not to mention make your team more capable of dealing with the missions faster. During your deployments you will find a bunch of items as drops from enemies mostly, but usually there are some that come as rewards and such. There are only so many items you can outfit your Marines with. Once everyone is kitted out in the best stuff you have for their level and role, then you can basically sell the old ones for experience. I suggest you even sell the ones that they can't wear yet if they have bonuses you don't need. About now, I should mention that your Space Marines can't actually die. Instead they get knocked out and have to either be revived by a teammate during the mission. Cyrus is particularly good at that if you invest in those particular abilities, or they'll be revived once the mission ends. You can however fail missions and can't retry them because, like I said earlier, the campaign is on something of a ticking clock. So the initial campaign in Dawn of War 2 is pretty damn cool, and I super enjoyed playing it way back when it was released actually. But it did lack one big part of the Warhammer 40K universe, which was added by its first expansion, Chaos Rising. The corruption system introduced in the Chaos Rising expansion makes a lot of sense, both for inward reasons, as well as for the fact that it plays heavily into the campaign storyline, everything having to do with finding out who the traitor is amongst the Bloodravens. In the Warhammer 40K universe, Space Marines and most other sentient beings are under constant threat of being corrupted by the Chaos Gods. Space Marines being those who are oftentimes directly exposed to this type of corruption in its many forms, it makes sense for this to have been a big part of the game from the onset, but I don't know, it probably got cut initially for time. Your roster of potential characters increases with the expansion and their stat loadout tends to be considerably more balanced than the initial ones, basically making Chaos Rising the complete version of the game, I think. And it's also interesting to see what happens with the corrupted items that you'll get access to when you want to actually sell them for XP. As a hint, you can't. Glad to report that 10 years later, the game still holds up very well. Playing it is still fun and challenging, and I have to be honest that I still get a chuckle when these characters, having these very no-nonsense, righteous, almost preacher-like cadence lines, have to say the names of orc bosses such as Gut Wrencher, Skykiller, etc. It's, I don't know, I just find it very funny. The reason I'm not going into the second and final expansion, Retribution, in this video is that I have never actually played Retribution up until now, and notice that they have added campaigns for all the other playable races and factions in the game, which means that I'll need a bunch more time to play a bit of each and then I'll report back about that one as its own video. So I'm going to end it by saying this. If you want an entry point into the convoluted insanity that is the Warhammer 40K universe and don't know where to start in terms of video games, I suggest you do it with Dawn of War 2. It sure as hell worked for me. If you want to play a kick-ass real-time tactics game in a sci-fi setting, then it will work just as well for that. Thank you very much for watching. I've been StefaNonsense, and if you made it to the end of the video, then I suggest you be kind, subscribe, since you might enjoy the rest of my channel. See you next time.